Hello everyone, Season 25 for Diablo 3 was revealed yesterday and the first PTR started just a couple of hours ago. I haven't looked online to confirm, but I'm pretty sure that the world of Diablo 3 is very moist and erect right now because these changes are kind of crazy and a lot of fun. It's interesting because I think a lot of people were worried that nothing was going to live up to Ethereal's, but it looks to me like this season is going to be even crazier, and the Diablo 3 team definitely aren't chilling just because D2 Resurrected is out now or anything like that. Like I said, the PTR is only a couple of hours old, so there's still a lot we don't know about the Soul Shards, which is the theme for the season, and I'm sure people are already starting to create these conclusive lists of everything that they can do, and then that's going to be showing up within the next couple of days. But I'm going to give you a preview on what they are about right here. As you can tell, by the way, I'm a spooky skeleton. I'm a witch doctor with the new spider gear. Extremely exciting as well. This class is going to be amazing going forward, but I'm going to make a separate video talking about that. So yeah, the theme for this time around is Soul Shards, and it's these shiny bad boys that I have in my inventory right here. There are 3 for the Primevals: Diablo, Baal, and Mephisto, and it's so great that they made them look like the Soul Stones for the 3 Primevals as well. Perfect flavor, I love it. And then we have 1 for each of the lesser Lords of Hell, so Duriel, Belial, Andariel, and Razmataz. And these are socketable items like gems, so they go in your gear the same way a normal gem would, but they are much more powerful, and they do really crazy things that will really change your playstyle completely in some cases. So you can tell that I have a helmet down here and a weapon here, and that's to indicate that the Prime Gem or the Primeval Soul Shard goes in your helmet, which I think is great because, you know, Diablo's Soulstone goes in his forehead. And then the lesser ones, you put these in your weapon, which means that your loadout is going to consist of 1 prime one and 1 lesser one, and you're going to have to mix and match and hunt for the right ones to get what you want for the build that you are going to play. We're going to go through it a bit later, but like I said, these are really variable and can do different things, so I think it's going to keep the item hunting in this season interesting for a long time, kind of like how it was really exciting to hunt for Ethereals in Season 24, but I think this is going to go on for even longer and be even more exciting because there are more gems and they can do more things. There's going to be a frustration factor as well, because you're going to find ones that are perfect except for one aspect of them, and then they don't turn out useful for you. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with drop rates when it comes to these gems. That's going to be a major factor for the season. You can tell here that all of my soul shards have a small number in the upper left corner. It says 3. These soul shards have a rank. They start with nothing, no number. And then you find a legendary consumable known as a Hellforge Ember. You click on that, you click on your soul shard, and it goes from nothing to 1, then from 1 to 2, and then from 2 to 3, and 3 is the max rank. So when you first find your soul shard, it's going to have 1 primary affix, which is the main affix that gem always has, and then as you rank it up, you unlock the other affixes. It's going to be a little bit confusing to explain like how they work, because it is pretty complicated, but I'm going to go through the ones that I have here and it will start to make sense hopefully. But like I said, you have this 1 primary thing that the gem does, and then it has 1 more affix, a major affix that varies between different versions of that gem. So we have the different stains of sin here. It has 1 main affix that it will always have, the second one from the bottom in this case, and then the other one, the one that is at the very bottom here, can actually change between stains of sin. Again, it will make sense as we go through them. Also really interesting to note, if you look at all the affixes at the top right here, is that you get the effects that you would normally get if you put a normal gem of a color into that slot. So for example, you know, we put these flawless royal emeralds in our weapons usually, because that gives us 130% critical hit damage. Well, you get the critical hit damage on these gems as well, and as you can tell, this one right here has 150%, so they actually roll higher and are more powerful. And if you are Crusader, don't worry, the Thorns damage is on there as well. So even if you run, for example, Invoker, you're still going to be able, or Bombardment or whatever, you're still going to be able to use these gems and get your Thorns damage that you would normally get from a Topaz in your weapon. And same for the main ones, you get the life percent and the cooldown reduction. Some of these normal gem affixes seem to vary a little bit as well, but for the most part you seem to be getting the significant ones. Okay, so now I want to talk about the primary affixes for these different gems and what I think they are about, and how you're going to be using them in your playstyle. And I think I want to start with the lesser ones and with the Azmodan gem, which is the Stain of Sin. So primary affix, the thing that this gem will always do, right? You deal 25% less damage, which doesn't sound very good, but this is another really interesting thing about the gems. We're borrowing demonic power, right? Evil power, so it has to come at a price. So these gems actually make you weaker or debuff you in some powerful way, but if you play around it, it's going to turn out to be a massive buff in the end. So again, a lot of flavor, a really interesting design choice, and I think it makes a lot of sense. But the major downside of this one is you deal 25% less damage, but when you kill an elite enemy, you spawn a pool of blood that increases damage to non-elite enemies by 250%, and the pool of blood stays for 7 seconds. I've play tested all of these gems, and the pool of blood is very large. It covers a huge area, so you're going to be able to create massive like death balls with this, right? And then, now I'm going to look at the other major affix, the other affix that doesn't come from, normal color gems like topazes and diamonds. And this is the one that, remember, will not be the same for all Stains of Sin. And this one says, the pool of blood now negates elite affixes within its area, which is the most insane thing I've ever seen written on a Diablo item, more or less. It's so crazy. When we're doing high greater rifts, elite packs and their affixes, it's the only thing that stands in our way. And just switching them off and turning them into normal enemies, more or less, is so incredibly powerful. So the Stain of Sin to me seems to be about, if you use your imagination a little bit, seems to be about creating these insane death balls where you're killing entire floors in one just bloody pool of blood, literally. Because if you think about it, you deal 25% less damage, but you get the pool when you kill an elite enemy. So find one elite enemy, for example, that isn't too dangerous, get them down to quite low health, pull them with you, pull in a couple more elite packs, just a huge group of enemies into one area, pop your weak elite, get your pool of blood. So what happens? All the non-elite enemies take massive damage now, and all the elites have their affixes switched off. So you just start pushing a bunch of damage into the pool, and if you're using an area damage build, the boosted damage of the non-elites is just going to radiate and fry all the elites as well, and you're going to do a massive kill in one go, and you have 7 seconds to do it. So a really interesting potential playstyle here. It's going to be really interesting to see what people do with it. But let's look at another example of what the variable affix can do. Let's call them prime and variable affixes as we go through to keep it clear. Again, same thing, 25% less damage, you get the pool of blood, but now the other affix says, the pool of blood now collects rift progress orbs, which is so much weaker that it's insane. The other one is like one of the best affixes ever, and this isn't even, significantly convenient, because running around a little bit and picking up the orbs isn't the difficult part of greater rifting. So again, you're going to find some of these gems that seem like great and you want to use them, but then you're going to get like a shitty affix that you don't want to use, and it's going to be frustrating. Notice, by the way, that if you look at the top affixes here, these Stains of Sin have elemental damage on them. This one has lightning, this one has physical, this one has fire. You can get, for that affix, instead of elemental damage, you can get attack speed, which I think I have here. So again, it's not like the top affixes are always going to be the exact same, but they seem to conform to patterns. But 60% elemental damage is really huge. Going to be crazy for some builds. So that's the Stain of Sin, the big area of Blood and Massacre gem. Next we have Essence of Anguish, personal favorite of mine. I hope I get to use this. I hope it's good. This is the Andariel gem, and this thing is focused around poison damage, which is surprising. It makes perfect sense because Andariel fights using poison damage, and she hates fire. She's weak to fire, you know? That's the lore of that character, so I think it's good, but not every class in the game likes to use poison damage or has builds with poison damage, right? If you're a Necro or a Witch Doctor, it could be really cool, but not if you're, for example, a Crusader, you know? But so not all the classes are going to be interested in this one, but I hope, for example, the Witch Doctor will be very interested in this one. So the primary one is, every time you deal poison damage to an enemy, you increase your cooldown reduction, movement speed, and damage received by 5%. So that's the major downside to the gem for 10 seconds, and it stacks 10 times. So greatly reduced cooldowns, greatly increased movement speed, but you take more damage. It's kind of Squirt's necklacey in that sense. And then the variable affix. For this one, it says, when you deal poison damage to an enemy, they receive 50% increased poison damage from all sources for 10 seconds. If you are using poison damage, there are many like Necro builds that want to use different poison skills and stuff, right? That's going to be really good. But then an example of another one that you can get for your variable affix. And this is another piece of feedback, by the way, Blizzard. The wording on this affix is terrible and needs to change. It says your movement speed and cooldown reduction can be increased up to 15 times by dealing poison damage to an enemy. So I saw that and I was like, your movement speed increased up to 15 times? You're going to move so fast that you can't control the character. What it should say, what they mean, is that the primary affix that stacks to 10 can now stack up to 15. So it's a bump of 5 stacks on top. So it just makes the base effect of the gem more powerful. But you can tell how this one isn't really necessarily pumping out a bunch of damage like this one down here. But I hope to be running some poison builds this time around. Maybe it can be really cool for zombie bears, who knows. But cool gem, love it. Next we have the weirdest one. I think this is going to end up being the weakest gem that nobody likes, I think. But again, it kind of makes sense because Belial is kind of the shitty Lord of Hell that nobody gives top billing to. He's kind of the pathetic one, the schemer, you know. But this seems to be like an insane tanking gem in a way. So the primary affix for this one that doesn't change is reduce the damage of enemies hit by 33% for 5 seconds. Damage you deal is reduced by 50%. So your character is 50% weaker right away. That's big. That's going to make you feel really weak. But when you hit an enemy, they deal 33% reduced damage as well. So it's just a big toughness buff, but it makes you a lot weaker. And then the variable affix for this one is double the damage reduction enemies receive when you critically strike them. So again, they should change the wording. What they mean is that that debuff of 33% from the primary affix doubles to presumably 66 if you critically hit an enemy. So it's a massive toughness buff, but at the cost of so much damage that it's doesn't feel super interesting to me. Who knows? But then look at this one. This is really crazy. On receiving fatal damage, spawn a shadow that prevents your death, restores your health to 35%, grants you 225 all resist, and that's to all party members while active. So it's an extra proc. So this is like a crazy defense gem, right? But think about this. You have a bunch of group compositions where you have players that aren't interested in dealing damage anyway, and they're going to have a huge toughness buff from this, and they also have the ability to buff the rest of their party in crazy ways. So it's gonna end up seeing some use, but probably not as much for solo play, and I'm mostly interested in that, so there you go. But who knows, maybe like this is enough to give you crazy tankiness, and that allows you to push if you can somehow work around the damage debuff. Next we have the Duriel gem, which is the Remnant of Pain. And this one is built around freezing and crowd control and critical hits. So the primary affixes, your critical hit chance is reduced by 15%. Again, that's the downside of the gem. But attacks against incapacitated enemies are automatically, it should say guaranteed, I think, critical hits. So critical hit chance goes down, but if an opponent is completely incapacitated, you will always crit them. And then for the variable affix, look at this one. Your movement speed, while your movement speed is 50% faster than normal, you gain passability, which I think is a new word that we haven't seen in item descriptions before. It should probably say, you know, you gain the ability to walk through obstacles and enemies or whatever. But when you move through enemies like that, you knock them back and stun them for 2 seconds. So I have Severance now. I move fast enough to activate this. If I move through an enemy now, they get knocked back and frozen. And again, frozen enemies take guaranteed critical hits. So I run through somebody and then I can shoot them and I can deal a bunch of damage to them. So pretty cool interaction. But we're going to see some other crazy things that this gem can do. Look at this one. When you critically hit an enemy, you increase the attack speed of all players by 5% for 5 seconds, max 10 stacks. This is a blanket 50% attack speed buff to your entire party. So, I mean, if you're running with a Whirlwind Barber or a Zuni Witch Doctor who double dips on attack speed, it's such a powerful group buff that it's completely crazy. So, it's kind of weird. I think a lot of the controversy that will come with the balancing and design of these gems will, I think, center around group play a lot. This is so powerful that it's kind of wild. But there you go. And then look at this one. I have a third one for this. Hitting enemies with cold damage has a 50% chance to freeze them. Cold skill damage is increased to frozen enemies or frozen targets by 20%. So check it out. Now you're freezing enemies by hitting them, activating your guaranteed critical hits from the primary affix. And we already know, because of what demon hunters have been doing in the past, that can be massively powerful. So it's like a Bariza in your pocket. Turn any item into Bariza. Really, really cool as well. So this is going to be a massive damage gem as well. You can kind of tell how the Belial one seems pretty shitty by comparison. So next, let's have a look at the prime ones, and these are extremely wild as well. If we start with the Sliver of Terror, which is the Diablo gem, the primary affix here, this is going to be centered around cooldowns. Diablo wants you to have many big skills off cooldown for a long time. It makes you more powerful. So your cooldowns are increased by 25%, and that's the big downside of the gem. It might actually play into your playstyle when you're using this gem, but that's the downside. And then for every skill on cooldown, you take 12.5% reduced damage and deal 75% increased damage. So, I mean, realistically, think about those like bar builds where you just have a bunch of passive buffs that you just rotate and they're always on cooldown. Say you have 4 of those. That's going to be a massive toughness buff and a massive damage buff. It's going to be completely crazy. And then the variable affix on this one, your attack speed and critical hit chance are increased by 7% for each skill on cooldown. Interesting thing about that is if you're running this gem, you're going to have to look at your other gear and make sure that you're focusing more on critical hit damage on the rest of the gear, because you're going to get so much critical hit chance from the gem, and you kind of want those to be sort of balanced. But this is, I think it's cool that the Diablo gem is just, you're going to blast things with power, because I feel like that's what he's about, kind of. But look at this one, really fascinating. The variable affix here says you cast a devastating ring of fire after killing 50 enemies. I haven't been able to figure out exactly how powerful that ring is going to be. You know, if it's massively powerful so that you can use it to actually clear groups in high-grade rifts, that would be insane. And then you're going to like be counting. Obviously, they have to give you a tooltip so you know how far you've stacked it up, and then you pop your 50, and then you maybe, you know, use that to clear a group or something. Could be really cool, but it's a spell that Diablo uses as well. Indeed, you know, he shoots his fire nova, so you get that power as well. Really awesome. This to me is like one of the most fascinating gems, because it completely like alters your playstyle. It's the Bale gem, Fragment of Destruction. So you move unhindered through enemies, and when you move through them, this is the primary affix, you mark them with destruction for 7 seconds. And when you kill something that is marked, all of your cooldowns go down by 1 second. So you're going to have like negligible cooldowns with this gem. But if something survives if it doesn't die within that time, you take 2% of your maximum health as damage. And if you're below 35% health, you won't be spreading the marks. That's just to prevent you from killing yourself all the time. 2% isn't that much. I don't think you should be too worried about this. You have good sustain with most good builds, so like 2, 4, 6, 8% of your maximum health, it's not a huge deal. Usually when you get hit in this game, you don't get hit or you get one shot a lot of the time. You know, it's bigger chunks than that. So that's interesting. And then the variable affix for this gem will change how you interact with marked targets. So this one says, you now leave a trail of fire in your wake that slays enemies that are marked, you know, by running through them, if they go below 10% health. So it's an execute that is like reducing effective health for enemies by 10%. Could be really powerful, you know, if it works for bosses and stuff, but I kind of feel like Bane of the Stricken is already taking care of that, and it, you know, goes up so exponentially. So I don't know how useful that is. But if you look at this other one, you have a 25% chance to restore 5% health when an enemy dies with a mark on destruction on them. So that just gives you massive sustain. You can tell that sometimes you're just going to get something that isn't as useful, and you're gonna have to run with it temporarily until you find the one you really want. It's kind of like, I guess, getting an ethereal with the legendary affix that you didn't want, but you still have to take it for the damage buff. And finally we have the Mephisto gem, the Shard of Hatred. And this one is all about having enemies, many enemies or groups of enemies around you. And there are builds that focus on that want to stand in the thick of things. Witch Doctor is good at that because of our passives. But this one is you deal 15% reduced damage while you have 3 or fewer enemies within 25 yards. It's not a huge damage decrease, but if you have more than 3 enemies within the same distance, and I need to know if this is a Carl Pilkington, Ricky Gervais podcast reference. I think it might be. I think this team is from the UK. I'm not sure, but Carl Pilkington is a famous episode where he talks about 2 different kinds of insect being discovered within the same distance. And they're using the exact same wording. I think it's a joke. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure. Anyway, 25 yards. If you have more than 3 enemies, you deal 10% increased damage per enemy. This is really good. 15% reduction isn't that big, but you could have, you know, up to 100% damage increase. It stacks up to 100, by the way, by just having a bunch of enemies around you. So really good. And then the variable affix on this one, killing an elite enemy pulls all enemies within 40 yards to where the elite died. So it's a weird grouping thing that you can use. But again, you want to group enemies because of the primary one here. So they interact in a cool way. This one has your movement speed is increased by 50%. Each enemy within 25 yards reduces your movement speed by 10% up to 70. So you just put this in and you get 50% run speed at all times, unless you're around enemies. But again, you know, the Witch Doctor has stuff that sort of works in the same way now with this new thing here. And Jade Harvester is going to be wild with some of these gems. Specifically Jade Harvester, I think, is going to be crazy with a couple of these gems. So those are just some examples. You can tell that there are many different ways your gems can roll, but they're going to be, for the most part, just insanely powerful. And I have found a couple of them when I'm leveling up, by the way. So you can find one of these when you're like, you know, level whatever, and it's going to make your leveling process a lot quicker. So let me know what you think about this. I think it's going to be a lot of fun mixing and matching and theory crafting. I think this is going to be like the biggest theory crafting season we've had, more or less, because there's so much more to think about and consider here. And I think we're going to have, like, you know, midway through the season, somebody at a certain Paragon level just starts experimenting with a different setup and new builds, new ways to play these builds emerge. And I think group play is going to be impacted heavily as well. But it's just so cool because Blizzard in general, you know, are these dirty fucking psychopaths for the most part. Bandai Namco, who make my main game Tekken, they basically damage the game every time they make a single update. They suck at community management. They never communicate. There's no feedback. There's no testing. But this beautiful little island of purity that is the Diablo 3 team, they seem to genuinely care. They make new great content all the time that is free. It just comes out and you can play it, and it's fun and it's good. They address the exact things that need to be looked at, like the Witch Doctor buffs for this season. They are like the exact buffs that the Witch Doctor wants, and we're going to have extensive testing for all of this with community feedback, numbers, and everything being looked into with, you know, communication the whole way through. It's just so good to see. So I'm super happy about this. I'm looking forward to this season. I'm going to start doing a lot of in-depth play testing and some theory crafting now and see what I find, and I'll let you guys know. Next video is probably going to be about the Doctor, though, because it's going to be so awesome. Thank you so much for watching this, and I'll see you guys again very soon.